Hey, welcome back to Crash Out Week, where we crash out together as friends. So what are you crashing out about? Let me know. Right now, comment down below. What are you crashing out about? I need an answer. Can't just be me. Okay. Last time on Alyssa and the Books, we learned that we actually, despite having been saying on this channel for many years that we write thrillers, that actually I've been writing romances this whole time without even knowing it. Plot twist of the century. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go and watch this video that apparently I'm linking, which who knows if I'm actually going to do that, because I always say that and then I never actually link it. But it'll be the last podcast episode before this one. It was probably like yesterday that I posted it, if all my plans are working out successfully. Sorry, my hair feels too luminous and luscious for this moment. I was at a writer's conference. I literally wasn't. I was at a writer's retreat this last week. And it came with many a revelation, all of which I did need to hear. The first revelation was that Project Gas Station was a romance. The second was about Project Sunshine. So when I went to this retreat, I had a session with the mentoring author who was there, and I had sent him 15 pages of Project Sunshine, and then we had like a 45-minute meeting to discuss it. And this was after I'd had the conversation about genre with the editor and kind of learned that, oh yeah, your last book could be a romance, right? And I just want to be clear, no one at this retreat was like giving me prescriptive advice that I had to do anything in particular. They were just giving me advice on what they were seeing, and I have the option to do with that what I will. So I don't want anyone to take these videos to think like, oh man, Alyssa went to this conference and they told her a bunch of things and now she's like changing her whole life. No, it was more so that I had, I think needed the permission to challenge the way I'd been viewing my own writing. Like I'd been viewing myself as a thriller writer for so long that even when people would challenge it, it was like not from credible sources that I knew were looking out for me, you know? And in this case, like everyone who's been telling me these things know what they're talking about and have my best interests at heart. And also it's not just that they tell me things and then I'm like, yeah, I'll just agree with you. It's that it's like when someone tells you something and you realize like that is true and it has been true. And it's just now that I'm able to see it as the truth. This is making it sound like what I'm about to say is like some huge revelation, which it's not. That was the genre crash out was a big revelation. This is just like, just a piece of a larger puzzle. So when I was talking with him about Project Sunshine, we kind of talked about what happens in the book and just generally, and he was very encouraging, said the book was in good shape and that just to keep working on it. And the only things that he really said was to pull up the comedy a little bit, make it a little funnier. And I don't know if he even said anything about the romance, but I think I brought up bringing out the romance and he was like, yeah, it seems like the romance would work here. And so I am about halfway, hopefully soon. I'm actually not quite halfway through Project Sunshine, but the state that it's in at the current moment is that the first half was really fleshed out in the first draft. Like it had really clear scenes that I was able to copy over and edit through and write through. And it still took a long time to like work with those scenes and make them what I wanted them to be, but it was very well fleshed out. The second half of this book is an altogether different story because I don't know, there's nothing really to work with. I have the general arc. I have what happens with the climax of the thriller. Like I have how the crime, like what actually happens in the crime, how it all gets resolved, all of the twists related to the crime. And then I also have a generally where the romance is going. But that doesn't mean it's written out in scenes in a comprehensible way whatsoever, frankly. So I have about 15 chapters still until the midpoint. We're early in this book. I am 30,000 words into the book and we're still 15 chapters away from the midpoint. And if you can do that sort of word count math, we're in trouble. we're in trouble. There is so much that still happens in this book, but a lot of it, I can't quite figure out what the scenes actually look like. And so it's not that I found some big plot hole or anything like that. It's that I don't quite know what scenes need to happen in the second half of the book. And I thought I had a good idea of what happened. But at that point, I was pulling back on the romance and I was pulling back on the comedy. And I was kind of leaning into it being a more serious thriller. And I still could do that. Like, I still could go in that direction. But reflecting on the conversations I've had about this book with professionals in the last few weeks, like, I really think leaning into the romance and leaning into the comedy is the better, more true way to do this book, because that's how this book started. And like, when I give the premise of this book, people laugh. And I think I need to stay true to that. And I think I've been shying away from it being funny and from it being like a romance because it's weird and it's odd and it feels strange that you would be laughing at what's happening. And it feels strange that these characters would be, specifically one character would be like a romantic hero. Like, he doesn't fit the mold of a romantic hero. And maybe that's good, but it's more difficult to work with because I don't have very much like past material to glean from. Like, I don't know. His character is odd. Like, you can have a male lead in a romance who's like somebody kidnapping people. But usually those kind of protagonists are very sure of themselves. They're like mafia bosses. They're really like sexy guys who are like dominating and like, I own you. Like, very that sort of energy. And they own what they do. They're like, I'm bad and I'm choosing to be bad and maybe I'm the bad guy, right? Those are protagonists in romance novels. But there's also like sweet cinnamon roll guy main characters in romance novels who are really like sweet and have like a really vulnerable side and are just like kind of like sweet men. And so the issue is that Eli right now is sort of both of these things. He does kidnap people for a living, but he's also very vulnerable and thinks that he's doing the right thing, and he's very broken. And so it's hard for me to like see him as this hero in a romance novel because I wouldn't support somebody being in a relationship. I wouldn't support him even being in a relationship. Like, I don't know. And so I think that is what I'm just struggling with coming up with how the second half of this book works. Because I know what pieces need to come into place in terms of the thriller elements. I know where Greer needs to be emotionally and where Eli needs to be emotionally. But what I know I need to add in that I hadn't planned on adding in is like a really significant romance, because I'm not even going to decide right now if it's a thriller or a romance. It's going to be like every book I've written, or the last book I wrote, where they're very tight, where it's like 55% thriller or romance and 45% thriller or romance, like where there's a 10% different, like where they are very tight. There's a strong thriller that comes together and there's a strong romance that comes together. And then I can make the decision later about how to categorize it and what it needs, right? But in order to do that, I need to really bring in a romance subplot or plot, just a romance that is satisfying and hits all the beats. And I think I'm just struggling with the idea of that because these two, like, they're both going through the ringer in a way that's different from other books, because they're always going through the ringer in books that I've written. But it just feels like it would be hard for them to genuinely, like, fall for each other in the circumstances we're in without it overtaking the whole narrative and turning it into something else. But maybe that's where it needs to go. Like, I'm really just struggling with figuring out how to do this romance successfully. I don't know, but I feel like they should end up together. Like, when I think about their stories and like their arcs sort of mirror each other and complement each other really nicely. And I think that putting them in a really strong romance would really add a lot to this book. Like it's not the case that I think they shouldn't be together, because then I would just change things, and like I don't want to force them to be together when I think they should be together. It's just figuring out an organic way to bring them together without it feeling disingenuine and feeling forced. And honestly, I thought really seriously about just shelving this book, because now that I know and have decided that I'm going to be a romance writer with a very significant thriller subplot, it would be much, much easier to just kind of start outlining a new book where it's a romance that has a really solid thriller B plot that's like really tight in there. It would be so much easier to plot something new than to try to work with this thing that feels more like a thriller in a lot of ways. But I want to finish out this draft and see how it ends up. Because yes, I've written a first draft, but I wouldn't really call it complete. I want to like actually write out all the scenes of this book. And then if I need to throw it in a drawer for a year and write like a true romance, a true romantic suspense, high action romance, whatever we want to call it, still figuring out the terminology around this, then I can, But I really did think seriously about just putting it aside. But I think I need to flesh it out and see what it can be, because I think it might work. It's just very odd, and that's what's holding me back. But then I have to remember, like, odd books work. A lot of times it's the weird book that nobody thought would land that sells. And so I don't want to count myself out count this book out just because it's a little odd and different. Because honestly, odd and different are probably good. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to look at Romancing the Beat, which is a romance structure book, plotline sort of thing. And I'm going to map out all the beats that we're not hitting so far and hit them and figure out how they line up. And I started at the end of the writing retreat, I started working with note cards. And so I have like on the front side what chapter and like a high level, like where the character needs to be, what they need to be like working through in that chapter. And on the back side, I'm going to write out what actually tangibly happens in the scene so that I can write the scene easier. And I think it's Saturday night right now. I think that's what I'm going to do tonight is put these note cards on the wall in a way that I can like access them and also see like, here's what the scene accomplishes on one side and here's what actually happens. Like here's the arc of the scene on the other. And then I think if I can have that clear, then I can stop like crashing out about what happens in the second half of this book and just write it. Because that's what I've been able to do the last month or so is write the opening half of the book, because the source material, which is the first draft, was really clear. And now I just need to create like a really solid framework for what actually happens in these scenes so that I can write them. Because I still plan to do a manuscript swap soon with Cody. And so we need to I need to have this written out. And I debated texting him being like, hey, let's just not. But I think I do want to follow through and finish out this book and see what he thinks and get some insight on that. And also I think it could be a really good thriller too that has I don't know. But instead of trying to crash out about it and decide all these things, I'm just going to get out a romance beat sheet and make sure that this book is satisfying as a romance and also satisfying as a thriller. Like that, I think, has always been my goal and will remain my goal, is to make both of them satisfying. It's just that I'm flipping which one is the front. Which, to be honest, am I really flipping it? Because I think the romance has always been more important to me. And I just have been not seeing that. So anyway, that's the crisis for last video. We already had that. We already did that. So if you want to see that, go. But that's what I'm going to do this evening. And then I'll check in with you after that. This is going to be a quick little evening vlog where I sort of just work through this and get it all mapped out. Because I do have an outline for the second half of this book. I just need to scene it out, what actually happens tangibly. And I'm going to put that on the board. I'm going to do I don't know if I have time to do all this tonight, but I'm for sure going to get all of the Romancing the Beat like figure out if it is satisfying as a romance, and if it's not, what I need to add in. And then also scene out the second half. It's really funny, actually, because about a year ago, I was doing the same exact thing with Gas Station, is that I had realized that the fake dating element of Gas Station needed to be more central. And so I like went through Romancing the Beat and brought in the romance. And so it's funny that I'm doing the same thing now. I think in the future, I will use Romancing the Beat or some sort of romance structure as the main core. That is for future books. I don't know how that process is going to work. It's going to be different for me. But yeah, let's get working. Okay.
Where did the time go? How do we move so far away? Holding on, how much can we both take when love is an echo? I can't hear what you're saying when love is an echo. I can't hear what you're saying.
It's Sunday morning, and last night I stayed up. I mean, it was only till 11, which for most of you is probably just like normal. But I talked through this plot with a few people, specifically Brielle faced the brunt of my terrors. And I think it works overarchingly. I haven't gotten to the scenes yet. I've just done the Romancing the Beat for both of them, and I think it actually makes sense, allegedly. It's just hard with this book, and this is what I was kind of lamenting, is that I think it might be more of a thriller than a romance, and I this is the constant debate of my life. And so I've kind of decided that my plan for this book specifically is that I'm gonna have a really strong romance that is complete and hits all of the beats and is satisfying. And I'm also going to have a really strong thriller that hits all the beats and does it satisfyingly. And it's probably going to be too long is what's going to happen with that. It's probably going to be 100,000 words, 90,000 words, right? It's just going to be long because of that. And I'm going to finish this draft, and then I'm going to get some feedback on it, and then I'm going to put it in a drawer and be done with it for a second, depending. If it's feeling really good and I'm like, yeah, this is clearly great and I want to quit, like, I of course retain the right to use it if I want, but I want to finish it out. I want to do it well. I want to set myself up for a future where I could turn it into primarily a romance and I could turn it into primarily a thriller. Like, I could do both of those things by having all of that really mapped out well and written out well. And then, like, I can go in and cut what isn't necessary based on what genre it ends up being. I know this is an insane way to write a book, but honestly, it doesn't really make that big of a difference. It's just going to make it a little bit longer, which is fine. It's just going to be a few more romance scenes than I would typically have in a thriller, and a few more thriller scenes than I would typically have in a romance, right? Anyway, so that is what is popping with that. And also, what's difficult about this book is they don't really have they haven't had a conversation yet. The two of them, they haven't had a conversation yet, and we're 30,000 words into the book and they haven't had a conversation. But they have met. When you're using a beat structure like Save the Cat, or in this case I'm using Romancing the Beat by Gwen Hayes, when you're using a beat structure and it's a dual POV, I often find that my characters are going through the beats at a different time. And I don't know if that's okay, but that's how it's rolling for now. Like, Eli starts the beats pretty much at the beginning of the book, of the romance. And Greer doesn't start them until about where I am right now, is when she starts the romance, because this is like really when she's actually meeting him for the first time. And so she can't be having all these feelings about him when she doesn't really know that he exists, right? Or she knows that he exists, but not, it's really complicated. Anyway, and so I kind of mapped out how this all goes, and I think it actually works. And about at the right after the midpoint, their romance is sort of like where they are in the beats sort of line up again. And so then the end, they're going through the beats at the same time. But if you don't know, most romances are like the first, like the basis of romancing the beat is that it's broken into 4 parts. The first part is like you meet the person and you can't possibly be with them, but you're attracted and intrigued, right? Like that's the first phase. The second phase is like, no, we can't do this. But then like the feelings really start to grow and you can't, and it usually leads to some sort of midpoint of love where you like accept your feelings and have a kiss or some sort of romantic gesture. And then after that, the third section is like doubt immediately sets in after things go well. Like things have to go well and then they have to like fall apart, and then usually that doubt leads to a breakup, and then or a breakup, whatever a breakup looks like for the book. Sometimes it's not really a breakup, it's just like a break in whatever's going on. After the breakup, it's like dark night of the romance, the wake up, like, and then it's like coming back to each other, right? So Eli starts going through that first stage of like meeting and attraction, and no, we couldn't possibly be together, but I'm attracted. He goes through that early. She doesn't start going through that until where I am in the book. And so then he starts going through his like deepening desire. I don't know, it just like goes on it's like slightly a different pace. And so there's a section where he's had his midpoint of love where he's like, where he starts to doubt while she's still deepening desire for him. Like it happens a little bit out of order. But it ends up, this makes no sense because I'm not giving you any details because it would really spoil the whole book if I did. I think it's gonna work. It's gonna be weird. But as I was talking to the people at this retreat, like I have to lean into what makes it weird. And I also had this revelation in the middle of the night that it's sort of a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It's not, like I didn't intentionally make it that, but I was so caught up with like, this couldn't possibly be a romance. What kind of romance happens where they kidnap the person for the main part of the book? Beauty and the Beast. And then the more I thought about it, the more, like even thematically, there's some parallels there. Obviously, we don't love Stockholm Syndrome around here, but like she gets to know, like she's kidnapped by him at the beginning, and then it's sort of this like journey of them bringing each other back to who they are. Like it actually is like a really decent parallel, but I hadn't planned it to be a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I'm probably not going to market it like a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but it was reassuring to think of it that way because I was so caught up in like, this couldn't possibly be a romance. And Beauty and the Beast is a romance. Is it a little questionable? Yeah, it is a little questionable. That's going to be the struggle of the romance part of writing this book, is like getting the reader on board with what the heck is happening. And so I'm just going to do my best. I'm going to hit all these beats. And I feel like I care about the romance. Like I think it will work. It's just, but I also know these characters really well. And so I need to get how I feel about these characters, because I feel fine with them getting together, honestly. In the way that it's happening in my head, I feel fine with them having a romance arc. But if I don't convey how I feel and have the readers feel the same way about them, it's going to be hard for people to buy into. And that's why I'm not even really that focused on like making this super, I'm going to make it good, but I'm not going to get all caught up about making sure that the readers are reading it exactly the way that I need them to see, because I think I'm just going to write this out and I'm going to put it aside and I'm going to get some feedback on it and see what people think, but then I might just write something new.
Silk lining, delicate paper, tangerine rind. Tulip petals on the dresser all come to mind. and shoulders, page 55. You trace letters over the pictures of the climbing vine. I'm in a field of your making. I can see a moonflower awaken somewhere way past taken.
Okay, first order of business. Who is making the Hunger Games edits? Who is making them on TikTok? Because I need you to stop. I need to stop crying every time I go on TikTok, okay? Stop immediately. Second order of business. Let me just move the Italian dressing out of the way so I can talk to you. I've been working on the cards, the note cards. I was starting at Act 2, Part 1. Yes, I'm 30,000 words into this book and we're only in Act 2, Part 1. I don't want to talk about it. So I did all of Act 2, Part 1 and all of Act 2, Part 2, and then I haven't done Act 3 yet. I think I'm actually gonna hold off for now and just get into writing the scenes. I've been using this formula. When I tell you, I was trying to remember like what those like elements of scene are, where it's like, I know you need to have a general arc, but I knew there was some sort of formula where it was like, you need these 3 things to happen in a scene. And so I Googled how to write a scene and I looked on Reddit until I found what I was looking for. And what I ended up using is there's the orientation of a scene, which is like orienting the character and where they are, like what the setting, like where are we, what's going on. And then there's the disruption, which is like the conflict essentially in the scene. And then there's the reaction, which is the reaction to the conflict. And then there's the conclusion, or in my case, the cliffhanger typically. But I did this for all these scenes and there's about 10 in each. I don't know if that's a decent number. I just need to get this done, like write this book and feel good about it. So I'm not doing a ton of like analyzing. But for example, the scene I'm writing right now, Greer is in the bathroom at work. That's the orientation, as we know. She's at work, she's in the bathroom, she's kind of like having a moment, thinking about the past, right? The disruption of the scene is that her boyfriend's assistant shows up to her workplace with flowers. Like he sent flowers for her. So that's the disruption, which is like, that's not really a conflict, but also part of the disruption is like, she feels self-conscious about her boyfriend's assistant showing up. Like she feels self-conscious about that for a number of reasons. So then that's her reaction to the disruption. And so her reaction to that is feeling uncomfortable, but then she also like, that makes her try even harder to like act super normal and like try to convince herself that she's not feeling how she's feeling, essentially. She ends up like doing something because of that. Like she accepts the flowers and she like sends a text to her boyfriend and she, yeah, I don't remember what else happens, but like anything she does because of the main disruption of the scene is what follows. And then the conclusion is like, where do we leave the scene off? And for me, that's typically like a cliffhanger of like, maybe she gets a text message, a mysterious text message at the end of that. Or I feel like I'm trying to remember what the cliffhanger was of that scene, because let me actually just find it. So the disruption is that the assistant shows up with flowers and Greer feels a lot of like kind of unfounded jealousy about it. Assistant leaves and her reaction is that she gets mad at the fact that she's jealous. Like she gets mad at herself for being jealous and then she's like, I'm gonna go on a walk. And then when she comes back from the walk, she's like, I'm fine, everything's fine. And then her boss kind of like yells at her for like taking the walk at the time that she did. So then the conclusion is her like, she's just been upset by this thing and then now she gets upset by this other thing, but she ends the chapter being like, it's fine, everything's fine. And you can kind of see that bubbling up in her at this point. And so that's sort of the resolution, the conclusion of the scene. That's like the least spoilery scene that I can tell you from this section, because it starts to get real in the weeds of the plot here. It's 19 through 31 through 30, 19 through 30 and 31 through 39 is what I've done. And I feel so much better about the book with the combination of like doing that romancing the beat and then being able to like actually tangibly see what scenes are gonna happen, and sort of taking the beats from the romancing the beat and threading it into the major mystery and thriller that's going on. I feel much more settled. Like I was kind of crashing out about this. I think even more so than you see in this video. So just being able to organize like tangibly, I have a roadmap now, and I think I'm going to be doing plotting like this. Like this is my way now, because it's not so detailed where you have to know every second, but it's also like really tangible, and it's like just the right amount of information. I guess I'll see once I start writing based on these scene cards, but it didn't take long, and it helped me so visually to be able to see, not even visibly, but like tangibly and concretely that this is what happens. And it, like I did all of Act 2, Part 1 in like half an hour at the coffee shop, and just being able to see like this is how this arc goes, and to be able to write it out and see like the scenes. I don't know, super helpful. I got this method from there's a video by Anna Vera that I watched where she uses note cards. I don't know if this is exactly how she uses them, but it's kind of a combination of different people's methods. I think Heartbreathings does something similar, but I am jumping on the note card bandwagon. I'm jumping on, I'm obsessed. So that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for being here. Comment down below, pen or a paper emoji. I'll see you so soon, like really so soon. Oh my gosh, bye.